I'd like to continue our journey with George Harrison and see what George is discovering as he travels through his many adventures, his many ups and downs in his life. Remarkable what George experienced. George came up with a really, I think, interesting way of approaching spirituality. He said, we have to become selfish to become selfless. So the idea is, how do we become free of this, concentration on ourselves all the time? And it's interesting, it's very paradoxical in a way that uh, you have to sort of concentrate on yourself a bit to really become selfless. And really, the way you become selfless, George felt, is to concentrate first on your own spiritual advancement. That it's very important to take time out to realize that if I'm going to become truly selfless, I have to kind of reflect on my own advancement and say, really, am I advancing here spiritually? Am I growing? Am I spending enough time in prayer? So, and that might seem to some people like, very selfish. There you are, you're thinking about your prayer life and you're spending this time with God and yourself. And but really, the ultimate thing is not just to be self-absorbed, it's to achieve this God consciousness. And we do it through spiritual advancement. And we achieve a God consciousness. It kind of permeates everything that we do, permeates all our relationships. And we put God first, and we bring God to every situation. And George found when he was able to do that, he achieved a deeper level of calm and peace in his own life. And when he didn't do that, he was easily distracted. He became angry. You know, in a way, he felt he was kind of out of control, out of who he really wanted to be in life. And he found that with problems that he had with drugs and alcohol and problems with fame and, how to spend his money, all of these things. But when he changed and he concentrated more on his own spirituality and advanced spiritually and achieved a certain level of God consciousness, all that became kind of different for George. Uh, George participated in the Self Realization Fellowship. It was in Sintas, and it was only 3 miles away from the house of Ravi Shankar, his good friend in Los Angeles. Yogananda founded this, and he really honored the members' privacy. So George found he could go to this self-realization fellowship, and he wouldn't be bothered. And that was so important, because somebody as famous as George and as popular, difficult for him to just, well, I'll pull into this monastery, I'll go here. People are, it's George, and they're running after him and all of this. So that very much a sense of he could be who he was. He could achieve the sense of God consciousness there. He could pray freely there, and that was very helpful. Another difficult event in George's life happened in May of 1978. George's father died in his sleep. That was difficult. His mother had passed away, now his dad. Uh, but as many times happens when there is a death, there's a new life that kind of comes on the scene. And so a few months later, in August of 1978, a son was born to Olivia and George. Donnie, and Donnie was named after the notes on the Indian music scale. So again, this love of Indian music figured even in the name of his child. And Donnie really, very interestingly, also fell in love with rock and roll and also loved music like his dad. Uh, and so George and Donnie formed a very deep relationship. George was also a big Monty Python fan. He had a great sense of humor, a great loved satire, and he even mortgaged his Friar Park home to finance their hit movie The Life of Brian in 1979. So again, showed his support for Monty Python. Also, in terms of social causes, George, interestingly, was not just thinking of himself and so self-absorbed in his own spirituality. Very much, he supported boys' clubs, and he protested against nuclear arms, and he advocated for the environment. Great sense of love for nature, and spent a lot of time at his own home in Friar Park with the gardening and developing various trees and plants. Just loved that, loved the environment. So advocated very much for the environment and against nuclear arms. In September of 1976, George was fined $500,000 for subconsciously plagiarizing his hit My Sweet Lord from the 60s hit He's So Fine. So this certainly wasn't something that George did maliciously, but when you compare the two songs, there was a similarity, and many times for a composer, you can see how that would happen. They might know a certain song, uh, they might sing the song and be familiar with it, and then you're doing your own composing, and it kind of sneaks in there. And George certainly did not intend any harm, but he did agree to pay that fine, that $500,000 fine. December 8th, 1980, of course, is a big moment in George's life and the life of many people, and that is the murder of John Lennon. Uh, the question that raised for George was, where could a Beatle go to be safe? This Beatle phenomena had been so intense and had been so amazing for so many people. They just, obviously fell in love with the Beatles, loved their music, uh, and that type of fame draws different people, and some of the people, of course, not too mentally stable. And here, John Lennon shot outside his home. Just a terrible, terrible, tragic event, and had a profound effect on George, of course, and on many people who just loved John and his music. After he got over the initial shock, he spoke about feeling John's presence. And it's very interesting with the Beatles. When you look back, you think of their split, and you think of, well, maybe was there a lot of animosity? No, that it didn't seem to be that way. Certainly with George uh, and the others. I mean, there was a sense of, it was time for us to move on, move into our own music, do what we had to do. But the realization that that was a good period in their life, and they had a lot of good moments together, and they created beautiful music together. And so this was a shocking event, and George frequently would say, I feel John's presence, I feel that connection, because they were so connected musically and in fellowship and talking and sharing together. Uh, so George, after the death of John, withdrew from some places he would normally frequent because of his fear, an understandable fear, that he would be shot as well. So this certainly impacted George greatly. Uh, the song Sat Singing describes leaving your body during meditation. The title is a play on sansang, an abbreviation of the Sanskrit term sadhu sangha, which means the company of holy people, kind of like our communion of saints. So this idea that people that have gone before us, people that have traveled the journey, people that we've lost, our parents, our friends, relatives, people that we've known and have deeply impacted our lives, we're still in communion with them. And so this idea of the sadhu sangha uh, very impacted, very much impacted George. It impacts all of us in a certain sense when we think about people that have gone before us. Uh, and it's interesting, it is found in the Hindu, Buddhist, Jain, and Sikh traditions. So this idea of the communion of saints, the communion with the holy, those people who have gone before us, very interesting phenomena across many religions. And so you can see how the death of John Lennon, the death of his mother, his father, other friends, this very much impacted George, but this theology of communion, this theology of being one with those who have gone before us, and one with those who are holy, those who are what we would consider to be saints, holy person, wise people, guides, leaders, teachers, the impact they have on our lives. Very important to George, and really, when you think about it, very important to all of us.